Project Workbench.
And holy blockbuster, Batman, we have a sneak preview of the Cape Crusaders' first movie.
Hi, Bruce Wayne.
And what do you do for a living?
Steve Kometko begins his special report on summer movies.
All right, big article in the LA Times calendar section yesterday about the amount of money Hollywood studios will spend to promote their summer movies. Tonight, Steve Kometko begins a 5-part look at some of what Hollywood has in store for us this summer. A handful of films which added together have the potential of making this season the most profitable summer in Hollywood history. Could go the other way, too, I guess.
No, I don't think it's going to. It's going to be a big summer. Profitable for the studios means making the audiences happy. That's why there are so many films coming out with Roman numerals after their titles, like Ghostbusters 2 and Star Trek 5. Tonight, though, we're going to begin with one of the summer's most anticipated blockbusters, in spite of the fact that it is not a sequel. The movie is Batman.
Don't kill me! Don't kill me! Don't kill me, man! What are you? I'm Batman.
Normally, a big-budget movie like Batman would generate lots of pre-release publicity by getting the stars and anyone else connected with the film to talk it up months before its release. But in this case, the studio is taking the opposite approach. Mum's been the word on Batman.
Nobody's seen the picture. It hasn't been screened. You know, you can't read any newspaper column telling you how an audience reacted to it.
Even so, audiences do want to see it.
Batman.
Batman's the big one, huh?
Batman.
Batman? Oh, Batman.
Lieutenant, is there a 6-foot bat in Gotham City?
In spite of a kind of press blackout, one CBS reporter did get the man who plays Batman, Michael Keaton, to answer the question of what went through his mind when the part was offered to him.
I thought this clearly isn't me.
Keaton might not have thought he was the ideal Batman, but showing more faith was the film's director, Tim Burton.
He's also got a nuts quality, which you can see him, I could see him putting on a bat suit.
It's a psychological portrait of Batman. It's Batman as a schizophrenic in a way. One person during the day, another person at night.
For now, audiences have to content themselves with just seeing the Batman theatrical trailer, and some fans are going to theaters just to see that trailer. Here's some of what they're seeing.
And what do you do for a living?
I'd like you to handle this operation personally.
Me? Nice outfit.
And oh yes, another who's seen the trailer is Keaton himself. His reaction?
I'm a knockout, aren't I?
Wait till they get a load of me.
You'll be able to see for yourself whether Keaton is a knockout and whether the Joker gets the last laugh when the movie opens on June 23rd. Tomorrow night, as our series continues, we'll have a look at a sequel that's being released 5 years after the original, Ghostbusters 2. The movie I want to most see this summer is Batman. I'm dying to see it.
All right. And we're going to see to it that you can go.
Okay.
We've arranged
Thank you very much.
On After 8 this morning, violent comic books. Don't laugh. If you haven't thumbed through a superhero comic lately, you may be shocked at what's on the shelf. It used to be that comic book violence was all pretty much kid stuff. A bang or a pow to the jaw was usually the extent of it. No blood, no mess. But not anymore. In the last decade, the dosage of extreme graphic violence and sexual suggestiveness has been on the increase in many comic books where the primary color is red, blood red. The books may be costly, but the blood flows freely. Grisly brutality and outright sadism have replaced the sanitized, bloodless violence of yesteryear. As a result, critics contend a dark, excessively cruel, and hostile world is frequently depicted. Psychiatrist Dr. Thomas Radecki has studied the trend, and he's concerned.
We get used to the old violence. We want something more violent, more thrilling, more exciting. There's got to be more blood, more amputations, more decapitations, something more brutal and hideous than before.
The increasingly mature themes may in part be fueled by a growing number of adult enthusiasts who now account for a significant percentage of sales. Mind you, not all the superheroes have changed. Some continue to fight crime the old-fashioned way. Yet on the same rack beside the relatively restrained Spider-Man, you are now likely to find the Green Arrow kneeling in front of a crucified prostitute, a bloody scene of Void Indigo, or a very adult subject drawn in the Elektra Assassin. Buddy Saunders operates a chain of comic book and hobby stores in Texas and is among the many concerned by the direction the comics have taken. Doesn't the seal on the comic make it clear who it's supposed to be sold to?
You're talking about the Comics Code?
Yeah.
Well, the Comics Code is no longer a guarantee in any way that the content will be appropriate for children. And a great many comic books do not have any kind of seal on them at all.
So how do you determine at your shop who's able to buy what?
Often with great difficulty. I don't think publishers are being very responsible in providing retailers with the kind of information they need when we order the books and when we receive the books. The information is just not there very often.
Talk to me about who's buying these kinds of books that I have laid out in front of me. Who's your customers?
Most of our customers are older readers. There's a high percentage of adult customers, and we don't have a lot of problem there. My concern as a retailer and as a parent is that these comics are also being aggressively promoted by publishers to the children's market. I don't know of any retailer or any publisher that doesn't want children as customers.
You think the violence is that widespread? I mean, if I picked out a representative grouping as we did that piece of tape?
The violence is extremely widespread. It is growing worse, and I feel like as a parent I can't allow my child to read most of the action-adventure superhero comics in that particular genre.
Let's talk to Chris Claremont a little bit. He may be the most successful and best-selling comic book writer in America today. And good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
How come we're seeing this? I mean, why are we seeing comics more violent than when you and I used to read them as kids?
Well, I think actually, when you said, was that a representative sampling, I don't think it was. It was a sampling of a specific end of the market. And what you have in comics today is an offering on the part of the publishers that is as wide and varied as the audience. In the case of the Void Indigo and the Elektra Assassin books, those were offered by Marvel's Epic comic line, which is it's an imprint that's specifically geared towards the adult market. And on the other hand, Marvel offers Star Comics, which is geared to the children's market, which is acceptable to very young kids, and the mainstream Marvel books, which are geared intentionally to the mainstream audience.
Yeah, but one second. I mean, we'll talk about that little kid in mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put up the shot again of the Green Arrow kneeling in front of a crucified prostitute. Now, this is pretty gory stuff, and you say this is for adults. And yet, I'm holding here a little statue of a little Green Arrow doll that is obviously meant for a child.
May I interject here? Green Arrow, DC feels that Green Arrow can be marketed to children. They've told us that. And they continue to tell us that.
What about Chris?
Well, by the same token, you see a lot of Lucasfilm product, for example, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, marketed to kids, and yet a lot of people found material in that film that was objectionable. I think what you have here is a dichotomy between the merchandising side of a comic book publisher or any publisher or any producer versus the creative side. And what the publishers are trying to do is differentiate their material according to an audience that is much larger than
they're not differentiating it well enough.
They're not.
Well, I think that has to come under a matter of opinion. I can speak personally for Marvel, which is trying very hard to address the problem, to give the retailers enough information in its solicitation sheets.
Marvel is a much more responsible publisher than, say, DC comic books.
Well, you've written to the publishers. When you write, what do they tell you?
They tell me that in essence, they tell me that I am from a backward state, that people on the East and West Coast are much more progressive and feel like that this material is appropriate for their children. They tell me that this kind of material is actually good for kids. It teaches them about how the world really is. And that leads me to something else, the way women are handled in these comics. If I don't have a daughter, but if I was a daughter, or had a daughter, I'd really be concerned about the message young kids are receiving as far as a relationship with women. Read these comics, you get the impression the only way you can have a relationship with a woman is by using a gun or a knife.
But I think, again, the flaw in the reasoning is the presumption that you can apply this attitude to the entire industry, and that isn't so. I think there are specific books which have to be addressed specifically.
Do you think it's an industry problem or is it a parental problem? I mean, he's got a good point, which is, hey, you know what, if you go to the movies, Debbie Does Dallas is playing right next to Bambi, and you can read anything you want on the adult rack right next to Shane in the library. I mean, why should your industry be different?
Parents definitely have a responsibility, but the comics industry has a responsibility too. I, as a retailer, have a responsibility to get the appropriate material to the right audience, and without knowing what's in comics. Now, if parents want to come in and tell me that I should sell anything to anyone, I guess I would acquiesce to that, but not like it.
So
but I don't think parents feel that way.
What do you want, censorship?
No, of course I don't
You want a rating
censorship.
system?
I would like to have, number one, when we order these comics, for the publishers to tell us what is going to be in them. That Green Arrow comic that we saw, DC told us that that could be sold to children, and when we received it, there was nothing there to tell us it could be. It was labeled mature reader. DC says mature reader means you can sell it to kids.
Would you resist a rating system?
I think it would be self-defeating, and I think, again, in Marvel's case, they have a de facto rating system in the sense that you have separate imprints, in the way the mainstream publisher would have separate imprints. But also, I think you notice in films, when you have PG and R, the tendency is to push to the heavier and heavier material.
I'm gonna have to stop this, guys, and end it like so many of the comics do with a little blurb at the bottom, to be continued. Yeah, Mr. Claremont, Mr. Saunders, thank you both.